We are live. Welcome to a CK podcast special edition with my guy, Cole Zwicker, man, from the Stepien, who I believe is the best analyst when it comes to the draft. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. That's a hell of an introduction, considering I had De'Aaron Fox very conservatively ranked in 2017, but happy to be on, man.
Okay, so real quick, who did you have, or where did you have De'Aaron Fox at?
I had him, I believe, 11 in my tier 3, I believe. I had Markelle in his own tier, and then I had like a mini tier and then another mini tier. So I liked him. I just thought he was a little risky, and he has proven to be on the positive end of that spectrum.
No doubt. De'Aaron Fox, very skilled, very talented. He had a lot of sayers, right, in year one, pretty much saying that he doesn't have the work ethic, he's too much into video games, all that stuff. I heard it all being here in Sacramento, but then you really started to see that hard work pay off during his sophomore summer, and he came into year two. Dave Yeager gave him the keys to the franchise, and he just played really well. He took advantage of the opportunity. This is his organization. He's the face of the organization now, and he made a lot of waves, right, nationally with Team USA. What were your thoughts on why he withdrew? Do you like the idea of all these players withdrawing from Team USA, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for a lot of the young guys, we just saw the value of the experience. Like with Bagley and Fox, they want to be a part of the practices and get in that environment. But at the end of the day, their allegiance is to their regular ball club. And I think that's fine. I'm not opposed to it. There's enough talent on Team USA where they can get away with it. If this is a different country and you had players of this caliber withdrawing at the last second, that would kind of send teams into a spiral. But the talent level's there, and I think that's probably why these players feel they can withdraw at times, just because they can be replaced. But for Fox, for example, I think that he got what he wanted out of the experience. He got to play with these, in that setting, upper echelon talent. And at the end of the day, it was like, okay, this is great. I don't need to play in the actual games, represent my country yet. My allegiance is to the Kings right now.
Okay, so is that how you see it, or do you see a little bit of De'Aaron Fox? I didn't get to play. I believe he played 6 minutes in that game, and for him, knowing that the Kings will be in India, and a little bit of politics playing and all of that, right? Because we heard that he was head and shoulders more physical, just simply better than a lot of these guys, and yet he wasn't playing much. Derek White played more of that. So from De'Aaron's standpoint, it's okay, why am I going to travel all these miles and then not get to play, right? Do you think that has a little bit to do with it as well?
It might, and De'Aaron much better than me as far as his mental makeup and how competitive he is. But I think looking at it realistically, it's not like he was going to start over Kemba Walker. You have these veterans that are more entrenched, and the publicity he was going to get, he was going to play. He was going to play a major role in that team, even if it was a lesser minute role. He's the most athletic, the fastest player in the tournament. They were going to have to use him at times, so he's not someone who's just going to float in and out of lineups. I think when they really need him, like someone like Brook Lopez, for example, might not play as much in certain games, but De'Aaron, they're going to need his transition play. He's probably the next to Giannis, or I should say, definitely second to Giannis, maybe the second best transition player in the entire tournament. So maybe that's how he felt. Is like I'm not going to have a major role. If he was 4 years down the road and he was going to start, maybe he stays. I'm not really sure. That could be a factor.
That's fair. That's fair. Did you like the idea, though, of De'Aaron Fox, Donovan Mitchell being that future backcourt of Team USA, even for the Olympics? I know a lot of the guys, first stringers, second stringers, withdrew, but I felt like those two guys could have solidified their statement at this tournament for the upcoming years and for the next 10 years.
Yeah, it's a great point as far as setting that foundation. I would view it as promising that De'Aaron especially was viewed as kind of the principal playmaker, like the primary initiator on that team in the future, potentially. Because Donovan, he can do that, but he's always been more of like a combo guard. I think viewing De'Aaron as more of the point guard and him being invited and featured in like a secondary role was really promising. Tatum as well. You can throw those three rookies in there. They seem kind of like the foundational pieces from that draft class.
So the main topic of this show, before we get into any more Kings talk, is who would you start your franchise with which comes between Donovan Mitchell, Jayson Tatum, and De'Aaron Fox. They're all from the same draft class. Obviously, one guy went 3, one guy went 5, and the other went number 12, 13, I believe. So, if you were a GM, who would you start your team with, and why?
It's a great question. Are we talking about right now from this point?
From right now, yeah. Just knowing what you know, just the information that you may or may not have. That makes any sense.
Yeah, so if I'm working from a blank canvas, I think I would take a shot at De'Aaron. I think his upside is the highest. I think he's the least safe out of all these guys. Like, I think Mitchell and Tatum especially, scales much better to winning. It's easier to fit them into a role on a competitive team, a championship level team. But if you're really swinging for the upside, and De'Aaron's road to being elite is harder than them, because he has to be more of the on-ball focus point. He has to be the initiator. He has to play make for himself and others efficiently in the half court, which is something we haven't really seen yet. But I do think the upside is there. His speed, his ability to he's added some strength from year 1 to year 2. I never had any questions about his work ethic. I think he was my favorite kid in the class. I question more, so how is he going to score efficiently in the half court from a jump shot perspective? And he's made improvements there. So it kind of comes down to your risk tolerance. A lot of people would say Tatum because, again, he scales easier. There's a safer road and an easier road for him. But I think at this juncture, if I was working from a team that had no pieces, I would take a shot at Fox.
You mentioned jump shot. Did you see a difference in his mechanics from year 1 to year 2, or even from his freshman year at Kentucky? And now, are you seeing something differently in the shot, or do you think it's mainly confidence for De'Aaron Fox?
I think it's a lot of confidence, but there definitely is differences, and I think some of it's strength-based. If you watched him shoot at Kentucky, he was not getting the ball there consistently from deeper ranges, and that's something that he really needed to improve on, and that's something he can. When you can improve your functional strength, he always had touch. That's something with De'Aaron is, even when he wasn't making these shots and he wasn't confident, he was really good on runners. He had that natural touch with his left. So mechanically, I think he probably ironed it out a little bit as far, but I still see generally the same shot. He kind of brings it back towards his forehead. It's not the most fluid, like Trae Young one motion shot that he can shoot from 30 feet, but I do think the strength really, really helped him there.
Okay, so you thought strength from the start was going to be his biggest issue. Do you see that same type of issue with Marvin Bagley being a lefty, or do you see more of a hitch in his of an extra unnecessary hitch in his shot?
I think more so Bagley has that foundational touch, maybe not to the extent as Fox, and they're shooting different shots. That's what's really important about these two players. Bagley can shoot off the dribble, but you see that more in the mid-range. Like, he can take a bigger guy, a less mobile player in space and shoot over the top. He's not shooting these dynamic pull-up threes under, like, stark isolation contests. Those shots are harder, and I think Bagley shows enough foundational touch to, in time, extend past 3. I thought he used to get a lot of lift into his shot, and I questioned a lot of the bigs you see shoot threes very good on volume. They rarely have any lower body input. You look at a guy like Karl Towns, Larry Markkinen, and Bagley used to be kind of a jump shooter, but he kind of refined that a little bit. He's shooting more of a low input, lower body shot. I don't think his touch is great, but he has the mechanics to extend. Like, compare him to someone like DeAndre Ayton right now, who has a better touch than Bagley, but just doesn't have the mechanics to get the ball there. He can't shoot a 3 in a game yet, and he has to refine his mechanics there. I don't think Bagley has to do it to that extent nearly. He can already shoot. It's about degree with him. How good of a shooter can he be?
How good of a shooter can he be?
That's a great question. I do not have an answer for you. Usually we see with these elite shooting bigs, they'll give you some signs early. Like, Karl Towns was like an 82% free throw shooter in college. Larry Markkinen was a historically good shooter. So I don't know. We're looking at maybe he can take a road maybe like Al Horford, where eventually he's a 36% three-point shooter on volume. I'm not sure if he can get to that level, but it's within his range of outcomes, and that's important.
Is that the next step for Marvin Bagley, becoming a very solid three-point shooter? Because both you and I saw him as a center coming out of the draft, and a lot of people are just stuck in this. He's a power forward, but even last year, him and Willie Cauley-Stein really couldn't play very efficiently together. And that's how long it's been since I've had you on the show when we're talking about Willie Cauley-Stein potentially being something. But that's neither here nor there. But is that the next step for him? And do you see potentially him being that second option in the future, or is his role always, or it, well, one thing is us believing that his role can be this, and the other thing is the front office thinking that he can be something else, right? But do you think he'll be more efficient getting like not garbage buckets, but just stuff around the rim, using his second jump? Is that his best role, or do you potentially see him being that second option after De'Aaron Fox?
I like him in a play finisher role where he can play like a five, but you have to get specific surrounding talent and personnel around him. So someone like a Dwayne Dedmon, for example. That's why I liked that signing, is because it put Marvin Bagley in a position to succeed. And you're going to see him more in pick and roll with De'Aaron Fox. I think you have to utilize his ability to score and score, on the interior as well. Like, you want him to space, of course. There's going to be plays where he's spacing out to the corner or the elbows or attacking in isolation. But I think at his foundation offensively, you want him to play like a modern version of Amari Stoudemire, like a guy who can just set screens. You can either pick or dive, and you can really eat up space. You can operate from the mid post. I do think that consistent 3-point shooting is his next offensive step. It just makes the most sense outside of expanding and really starting to use his right hand. But when we start viewing about his outcome range, I think certain things are less likely. We're talking about developing high-level defensive instincts and really utilizing his right hand more to make himself basically unguardable for a lot of smaller players. He's so good at finishing over the top.
But you see him as primarily a center, right?
I think for me, this is always kind of my juggling act with Marvin. He's more of an offensive 5 and a defensive 4. I don't know if he can be a primary rim protector. I think he's better in space as far as a switch guy. He can do some weak side stuff, but he has to improve his IQ. But offensively, I do see him as a 5.
And I know both you and I had Jaren as the best big in that draft. Do you still feel the same way?
I do, just because he does things that I value. He's the best young defensive big that I've seen in the league in a long time, and he already can shoot volume threes above the break. And his ball handling ability is incredibly underrated. Like, he can take guys one-on-one. His handle is actually probably the strongest of any of those bigs in the class. Can really create his own shot that way in ways that I wasn't expecting. Like, I didn't expect him to hit that, in and out dribble, pull up 3 over LeBron. Like, that's stuff that I expected maybe way down the road. So I think he's shown more flashes, and he just kind of does. I'm always about defense first with bigs, and I think Jaren's the guy that profiles best to that.
And looking into this upcoming season for the Kings, what do you expect, honestly? We've had a lot of 538 saying they're not going to be very good, a lot of the national publications saying that they're not going to be very good, but after watching them last year, seeing them improve in terms of this summer, do you see them being better than last year, or does the question marks of Luke Walton being at the helm concern you a little bit?
No, I think they're going to be better, in my opinion. I think Fox probably takes another, at least mini leap. It's hard to take another significant leap to the level that we just saw from him. Maybe Bagley takes that kind of leap, and it projects them up. My issue is with Walton. He's going to run. He's going to play, pace and space. They're going to shoot threes. They're going to get up and down and really utilize, especially Fox's strength of playing in transition. My issue is more just the West is incredibly stacked. I was on a Phoenix podcast recently, and they were like, "Oh, we're not going to move up at all in the rankings." Like, where do you expect to go? Like, there's seven teams you can lock into the playoffs right now if they're healthy, and there's another 5 teams that are competing for that. I think that the Kings are on the lower end of that spectrum, but the West is incredibly stacked right now. So that's why I like to say, like, you're evaluating these teams on their compete level on a nightly basis. You're looking at them saying, how effective are they on the floor? Even if it doesn't equate to wins all the time because you're playing great teams, like, how consistently are you in games? Does it look credible? Because the Kings are still building for 2 to 3 years down the road. They just need to compete now and show that effort and that development level.
Yeah, I was mentioning to you that I went to the Bahamas with Buddy Hield, and I had a real close-up shot on how he handles his business, and how I told him that I've been around multiple NBA players, and the fact that he works so hard, even on vacation. He does more on vacation than most of these players do on their regular I need to work out times. And people that I've spoken to about De'Aaron Fox have said the same thing. He's working out 6 days a week during the summer. And this backcourt, this young backcourt is really putting in the work. And it shows because, as you remember, Buddy Hield couldn't dribble to save his life in year 1. And he's improved so much. And I told him that to his face. I'm like, bro, you couldn't dribble. And he goes, I know. I worked very hard for that. And that's the type of mindset and culture that's here now in Sacramento, which which is why I believe they're going to make the playoffs. And I think both of those guys can take the next step. How big is that next step? We don't know, but I just feel like they're better than the Mavericks. They're better than the Pelicans, than the Timberwolves. Am I kind of do you kind of feel the same way, or am I off base in your opinion?
I think they're in that tier for me. It kind of depends on injuries, honestly. A lot of this is just who can maintain health, and you have to bet on the Kings there because so many young guys who don't have, injury history necessarily. But I think I would still take the Spurs in the 8th spot. I just think their experience having Aldridge and DeRozan, they have the infrastructure. Derek White, I think, is going to take another leap. I'm really, really high on him. So it just comes down to, again, there's just so many quality opponents. I think it's probably going to break as far as who stays healthy, and I think the Kings are in that conversation. I wouldn't necessarily bet on them if I were to pick like 2 teams that I think could make the A spot, but I think they're in the conversation.
So who are those 2 teams that will make the last 7 8 seeds for you at least?
I think right now I would go San Antonio as the favorite, just trusting that established infrastructure. God, I want to say New Orleans so bad, but it's such a trendy pick right now. Zion.
Why?
Because I think their transition play is going to be incredible. I think they're going to be able to mimic a lot of what the Kings do with Zion in transition, Lonzo being an incredible outlet passer, and I really do trust their defense. That's the thing, getting Derek Favors, having Drew Holiday. I think they're going to be a really good defensive team. So I think from a consistency standpoint, I would probably favor them slightly over the Kings, but they're more in the same tier. Like I do feel, I'm not like super confident, but I would bet on the Spurs if I could.
But do you see Zion having the impact that Luka had in year 1? Because I don't. I just don't see what he's going to do in the half court. Obviously, I see him affecting the game defensively and in transition, but I don't see it in that half court.
I think he's going to be used in more versatile ways. You're going to see him be used as the pick and roll screener more often.
Okay.
And setting screens and dribble hand up situations, kind of like a super version of Ben Simmons in that way. I think you didn't see any of that at Duke because Coach K just doesn't try anymore, and he doesn't like to run stuff. But like you're going to see Zion like dribbling around and picking out shooters. I think you're going to see a little bit more diverse. I know Summer League was not very impressive in the minutes he played. He did not look very good. He looked out of shape. He has to be in shape and kind of report that way. But I think he might surprise a little bit more than you'd think there.
And for the upcoming draft for 2020, is there a sleeper that we should all be keeping an eye on? Or I know you guys do such great work year round, really. And so is there a guy that you're looking at right now and saying, man, like he's going to be really good?
Yeah, there's one sleeper for me, literally just one, that's outside the top 30 of ESPN's recruiting. Trey Mann. He's a point guard going to Florida. He's from that area, so it's his hometown team. This kid got recruited by like Tennessee, Kansas, so he's a big-time prospect. I think he ended up being a 4-star. But the problem is he's going to a situation where Florida's probably a top 4 or 5 team in the country. They have Andrew Nemhard as their returning point guard, so he might be coming off the bench. And I just watch his tape at lower levels, and I see elite skill level. I see a guy who can dribble and pass. He has great deception with his handle, tight control. One of the best shooters, if not the best shooter of the league guard class, probably maybe right behind Cole Anthony at the top. But this guy can shoot, 35-foot pull-ups. He's got diversity on his shot, 6'4". I think his IQ is pretty good. He kind of plays a combo guard role in lower levels, but I think there's more IQ there. I'm kind of on an island because not a lot of draft Twitter is on this guy yet, just because it's very hard to find film of him. But I do like his fit in the modern game. He wasn't as valued by ESPN, but 24/7 Sports, I think, had him as the 12th overall player in the freshman class. So they're more in alignment with where I see him, and I just see no buzz about him right now.
I know we've talked about this on the last podcast that I had you, but for the people who don't know you yet, and they should, because again, I think you're the best. Can you kind of explain your approach to how you scout or how you break down a player? Like, what do you look for, and how do you do it?
Yeah, so recently I've started watching more lower level film. Of course, we have to start doing that when the draft rules change, and you have to watch high school and you have to watch AAU. But I think getting that established foundation and seeing how guys develop is something that I've really incorporated. I watch a lot of tape, and I watch a lot of tape for feel. Like, I think that's the number one thing I look for in the court. You can kind of go through synergy clips and see a guy's skill level, right? You can go back and see their individual skills, like are they a good pull-up shooter, and then look at the footwork and all of that. But I think for me, I watch a lot of real game tape just because I like seeing how guys behave in certain circumstances. I like seeing, in a high leverage game, how does somebody respond to that? You can't mimic everything you see live. So I think you kind of have to get an element of that. So a lot of it for me is, do you know how to play basketball? And I value that higher than most guys. You see a lot of, we've talked about this before, like athleticism,
right,
plus tools and stuff equals upside. For me, I tend to go more towards skill, and IQ is really important for me.
So you just described Luka Doncic. Okay, that's fair. Is there? What else? I want to ask you something else regarding that. Okay, so how do you incorporate analytics to your analysis on certain players, or do you?
I do, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that it depends on how you define analytics. So I don't have like an entire crowd coming after me for this, but I mean, I look at everything. I think you have to use a holistic picture and every single bit of information that you have that's valuable. If you just use the eye test, you're gonna miss on contextualizing guys' stats. If you just use stats, you can't see the full picture. So, I incorporate, like, I have a database of every prospect drafted or undrafted since like 2000. Since we have information, so I always see how they compare relative to each other. I don't know if you can consider that analytics. I look at, synergy and like pull-up numbers and stuff like that. So It definitely matters to me. Like assist turnover ratio. There are certain metrics that I do think have a lot of weight in this process.
That's awesome, man. We really appreciate your time. Is there any type of projects that you're working on? Where can people find you? Where can people read your work, watch your stuff?
As usual, at thestepien.com. We will try to be higher on Kings draft prospects in the future now. No, a lot of people did like the Kings prospects. I like Bagley too. So I will have different articles there. I just did one about Trey Mann, the sleeper that I mentioned. I wrote a 44-minute piece on Isaiah Joe, who is a returning sophomore, not even a top 30 prospect. So if that's your cup of tea, that's something you can indulge in. And I do the Game Theory podcast as well with Sam Vecini, usually once a week, and we do a lot of prospect discussion. We'll get into a lot of these guys in greater detail before the college season, so you can check that out as well.
There it is, guys. Cole Zwicker from the Stepien, the man, the legend. Appreciate your time, brother.
Anytime.